He paid for a housekeeper and got a fierce outcast instead, then realized she was the perfect fit. He had always been a man who liked things to be in order. His house, a modest two-story home at the edge of town, was neat, clean, and well-kept. Every book on the shelf was arranged just so. Every plate in the kitchen had its designated spot, and the flowers in the garden were pruned regularly. But life had grown busier for him over the last few years. Between work and managing personal matters, he realized that keeping the house in perfect order was becoming increasingly difficult. The laundry would pile up, the dishes would linger in the sink, and dust would slowly settle on the shelves. For someone like him, who valued cleanliness and order, this was unsettling. He often thought about hiring a housekeeper. He wasn't used to asking for help, and he certainly didn't want someone who would just drift in and out without care. He wanted someone reliable, discreet, and competent. Someone who could quietly take over the chores without disrupting his daily routine. The idea of having a person who could manage the home efficiently while respecting his space seemed like a dream. One evening, after finishing a long day at work, he sat in his living room and scrolled through local advertisements for housekeeping services. There were a few names listed, some with glowing reviews, some with none at all. He made a list of those who seemed promising and decided he would call them one by one. The next morning, he started making calls. He spoke politely to each applicant, asking about their experience, availability, and approach to household work. Some seemed nice enough, but he found himself hesitating. One sounded too young and inexperienced, another seemed too strict about rules, and yet another had references that were unclear. Each conversation left him feeling slightly disappointed. He began to wonder if he would ever find the right person. A week later, as he walked through the local market, he noticed a small handwritten notice pinned to a community board. It was simple, almost plain. A woman looking for work as a housekeeper. The description intrigued him. She claimed to have experience managing homes and offices, but there was a line that caught his attention. I do things my way, but I get results. Most people would have ignored that line, but he paused. It was unusual, perhaps even bold. Normally, he preferred people who followed instructions exactly, without question. But there was something about her confidence that made him curious. He jotted down the phone number and decided to call her. The voice on the other end was firm and direct, with a hint of caution. She didn't sound like someone who would simply nod and agree to everything. She asked questions about the house, the responsibilities, and the expectations. The conversation was different from all the others he had had. It was honest and upfront. She didn't promise perfection, but she assured him that she could handle the tasks in her own way. After some thought, he decided to invite her for an interview. He was nervous. He had never hired someone so different from the people he usually considered. The day of the interview arrived, and he made sure the house was tidy, as if the state of the living room could influence the outcome. He had prepared questions in his mind, focusing on experience, skills, and reliability. When she arrived, he noticed her immediately. She was not what he expected. Her clothes were simple but practical, not flashy or refined. Her expression was serious, with a hint of determination in her eyes. She shook his hand firmly, looked around the house without hesitation, and asked a few direct questions about the work she would be expected to do. The interview started formally. He asked about her previous experience, her skills in cooking, cleaning, and organizing, and her availability. She answered each question honestly, sharing small stories from her past jobs that revealed her resourcefulness and independence. As she spoke, he noticed that she had a quiet strength about her, a confidence that did not rely on charm or flattery. She seemed like someone who had faced challenges before and had learned to handle them with determination. There were moments during the conversation that made him uncomfortable. She asked why he wanted someone who would simply follow instructions without question, and she challenged him gently about whether he really wanted a person who could think for themselves. He hesitated, unsure how to respond. Most applicants would have agreed to everything, but she was different. She made him think about what he actually needed, rather than just what he expected. By the end of the interview, he was both intrigued and confused. He wasn't sure if she would fit into the quiet, orderly life he had built, yet he felt a strange sense of relief. There was honesty in her manner that none of the other applicants had shown. She wasn't pretending to be perfect, and she wasn't trying to impress him with polite words. She simply presented herself as she was, and for some reason, that felt refreshing. After she left, he walked around the house, considering his options. All the other candidates had seemed safe, predictable, and perhaps boring. She was unpredictable, strong-willed, and slightly intimidating, but she had something else as well. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he sensed that she might be capable of handling his house in a way that was efficient and practical, even if it wasn't exactly how he would do it himself. Days passed, and he found himself thinking about her more than he expected. He remembered the way she had spoken, the way she had noticed small details in the house, and the way she had questioned him without being rude. It was unusual for him to feel this way about a prospective employee, but he realized that she had left an impression. Unlike the others, she had not tried to blend in or act as if she were someone she was not. She had been real, and that authenticity lingered in his mind. Finally, he decided to call her back. His heart was pounding as he dialed the number, unsure of what to expect. When she answered, he felt a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He explained that he had thought about the interview and wanted to hire her. She paused for a moment, then asked a few final questions about her responsibilities and schedule. Her tone was calm and professional, but there was a spark of curiosity as well. When she agreed to start the next week, he felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He wasn't sure what he was getting into, but he knew that this choice was different from anything he had done before. He prepared the house for her arrival, trying to balance his need for order with the understanding that she might do things in her own way. It was a small test of trust, and he hoped he was ready for it. The day before she arrived, he walked through the empty house, noticing the quiet corners, the stillness of the rooms, and the subtle imperfections he had ignored for so long. He thought about what it would be like to have someone else manage this space, someone with a personality and style that did not mirror his own. For the first time, he considered the possibility that the house could feel alive in a new way, not just clean and orderly, but vibrant and dynamic. As evening fell, he sat in the living room, reflecting on his decision. Hiring her was a gamble. She was an outcast in the eyes of many, someone who had not always fit neatly into society's expectations. But perhaps that was exactly what he needed. A person who was strong, independent, and unafraid to be themselves might bring something new and valuable into his life. He went to bed that night with a mixture of anticipation and doubt. He wondered what the first day would be like, how she would handle the tasks, and whether he would regret his choice. Yet, deep down, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this unusual, fierce woman was not a risk at all, but an opportunity. And sometimes, life's most surprising and rewarding experiences came from the people we least expected. The day she arrived, the man felt a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. He had spent the previous evening imagining how it would go, wondering if she would meet his expectations or completely challenge them. He had prepared the house as best he could. Everything was spotless. The kitchen was organized, and even the small details like towels and cushions were perfectly placed. Yet deep down, he knew that she was not the type to simply follow instructions. When the doorbell rang, he straightened his back, smoothed his shirt, and went to open the door. She was standing there, carrying a small bag and wearing practical clothes that hinted at readiness rather than style. She looked around at the house with a steady gaze, and for a moment he felt that sharp impression again. The one that made him think she noticed everything, even without words. "Good morning!" she said firmly, shaking his hand. Her grip was strong and her eyes met his directly. There was no hesitation, no attempt to flatter. It was straightforward, confident, and it immediately made him feel a little off balance. "Good morning!" he replied, trying to sound calm. "Please, come in." She stepped inside and set her bag down carefully. She looked around the living room, her eyes scanning the furniture, the floor, and the shelves. "Nice place," she said. "You keep it tidy, but there's room for improvement." He paused. He hadn't expected a comment like that, especially not on the first day. "Room for improvement?" he asked cautiously. "Yes," she replied simply. "Some things are arranged, but some things could be more functional. I can help with that." He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. He had expected a polite nod, maybe a smile, but not this blunt honesty. There was something unusual about her confidence. She wasn't disrespectful, but she wasn't timid either. "Shall we get started?" she asked, moving toward the kitchen without waiting for him to answer. He followed her, feeling both apprehensive and intrigued. As she began working, it became clear that she had her own way of doing things. She rearranged the utensils, moved items in the pantry to places she thought were more practical, and even suggested changes in how he stored his cleaning supplies. At first, he felt a pang of frustration. He had never had someone take such initiative in his house, especially not in ways he hadn't asked for. "Are you sure about this?" he asked cautiously when she moved a set of spices from the kitchen counter to a cabinet.
"Yes," she said simply. "It makes more sense this way." "You'll see." He decided to let her try. "Perhaps he could learn to adapt."
As the hours passed, he noticed small things she did that surprised him. She cleaned areas he had never thought to clean, organized cupboards in ways that made finding items easier, and even fixed a leaky faucet without being asked. Her efficiency was remarkable, but it was accompanied by a certain fierceness. She worked with determination and a confidence that made him step back and watch in awe. There were moments when she challenged him. When he tried to suggest a routine, she would politely but firmly explain why another approach would work better. When he asked her to do something in a particular way, she sometimes refused, offering a more practical alternative. At first, he felt irritated, but slowly, he realized that her methods were effective. His house had never felt so well managed. As the day went on, he began to notice little details about her personality. She laughed occasionally, but not excessively. She was serious about her work, but there was warmth beneath her confidence. She asked questions, not just about the chores, but about his preferences and habits. It was clear that she cared about doing her job well, not just for the sake of doing it, but because she genuinely wanted the house to function smoothly. During lunch, he offered her a seat at the table. She accepted, setting her bag aside. They ate quietly at first, but then she began talking about small experiences from her past jobs. How she had managed homes and offices, how she had learned to solve problems quickly, and how she had handled difficult situations. She had faced challenges in her life that he could barely imagine, and she had overcome them without complaint. He listened closely, fascinated by her strength and independence. There was a story about a previous employer who had doubted her abilities, yet she had managed the entire household flawlessly while also handling emergencies that no one expected. Another story involved her helping a neighbor in a crisis. He realized that a reputation as an outcast did not mean she was flawed. It meant she had lived life on her own terms and had learned to navigate the world independently. After lunch, they returned to the work at hand. She tackled each room with focus, reorganizing, cleaning, and improving the flow of the house. She even suggested a small garden arrangement that would make the outdoor space more enjoyable. Each time she made a change, he felt a mixture of surprise and admiration. She had turned the house into something more than just clean. It was functional, comfortable, and welcoming. However, it wasn't all smooth. There were moments of tension. When he tried to insist on a particular way of doing the laundry, she shook her head and explained why her method was more effective. When he suggested moving a vase back to its original place, she argued that it looked better and was safer where she had put it. Each disagreement was brief, but it made him aware that she was not someone who would simply follow orders. She had her own sense of what was right and worked confidently to implement it. Despite the initial friction, he began to appreciate her honesty and courage. She was not afraid to speak her mind, and in doing so, she often helped him see things from a new perspective. Her approach was refreshing, even if it was challenging. He started to realize that perhaps he had been too rigid in his expectations. A housekeeper who was independent, thoughtful, and unafraid to take initiative might be exactly what he needed. As the afternoon faded into evening, he watched her clean and organize with steady hands. She moved through the house with purpose, addressing problems he hadn't even noticed. There was a rhythm to her work, a mix of efficiency and intuition that made the house feel alive. He felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have to worry about every detail. She was handling it, and doing so better than he could have imagined. By the time dinner arrived, he was beginning to understand her in a deeper way. She was not just a housekeeper. She was someone who could manage challenges, think creatively, and improve his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. He realized that her fierce independence,
which had seemed intimidating at first.
She brought structure without taking away freedom, efficiency without rigidity. During dinner, they talked more casually. She asked about his work, his hobbies, and his routine. He shared small details about his life that he rarely discussed with anyone. There was a trust growing between them, a sense of mutual respect. She didn't judge, she didn't criticize unnecessarily, and she listened genuinely. For someone who had lived alone for so long, this was comforting. Later that evening, when the house was finally quiet, he reflected on the day.
He had hired someone who was nothing like he had expected. She was not polite in the traditional sense, not submissive, and certainly not predictable. And yet, she had proven herself invaluable. She had a fierce energy, a sharp mind, and a caring heart, all qualities that were difficult to find in a housekeeper or in many people, for that matter.
He realized that he had been wrong to assume that someone had to fit a certain mold to be effective. She had challenged him, unsettled him, and yet in doing so, she had made life easier, more organized, and even more enjoyable. He felt gratitude and a growing sense of admiration for her courage and skill. Before going to bed, he peeked into the kitchen. She had left everything spotless, with little notes suggesting minor improvements for the next day. He smiled quietly.
It was unusual, but somehow comforting. She had taken initiative, not because she was asked, but because she cared.
And for the first time he understood that sometimes the best help comes not from someone who simply follows instructions, but from someone who thinks, acts, and cares deeply.
He went to sleep that night with a mix of anticipation and curiosity. Tomorrow would be another day,
and he knew it might bring more surprises. But he also knew that hiring her had been the right decision. She was fierce, independent, and unconventional. But perhaps she was exactly what he needed. And in that realization, he felt a strange new sense of hope. Over the next few weeks, the man began to notice something remarkable about her. The first days had been filled with curiosity, small surprises, and minor disagreements about how things should be done. But as time passed, he began to see the depth of her abilities, her sharp mind, and her extraordinary resourcefulness. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She was someone who could manage an entire household with intelligence and care, often anticipating problems before they arose. One morning, he woke up to the sound of soft humming. She was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the house. He watched quietly from the doorway, noticing how efficiently she moved, how every motion had a purpose. She arranged the table neatly, set out his favorite plate and cup, and even remembered the small detail of adding a pinch of cinnamon to his coffee, something he had mentioned in passing days before. He realized that she was paying attention in a way no one had before. She wasn't just performing tasks. She was thinking, observing, and making small adjustments that made his life easier. At first it had felt intimidating, even unsettling to have someone so independent and assertive. But now, it felt reassuring. Her fierce personality, which had once seemed a challenge, was now a source of stability. Her work extended far beyond cleaning and cooking. She reorganized the pantry so that ingredients were easier to find, labeled containers, and even created a small inventory list to track what needed to be bought. She noticed that some shelves were too high for him to reach comfortably and adjusted them. She rearranged the furniture in the living room to create more space and added small touches. A new rug here, a plant there, that made the house feel warmer and more inviting. It wasn't just her efficiency that impressed him. It was her foresight. She seemed to anticipate problems before they even happened. One afternoon, she noticed that the washing machine had started making a strange noise. She examined it carefully and discovered a small leak that could have caused serious damage. She fixed it immediately, explaining her method and showing him how to prevent future problems. He marveled at her skill and practicality. Her presence also began to change the way he viewed his own habits. She challenged him gently but consistently. When he left dishes in the sink overnight, she reminded him of the benefits of cleaning immediately. When he tried to skip dusting, she would quietly dust around him, showing how small efforts could make a big difference. At first, he had felt slightly annoyed, but gradually he began to see the wisdom in her actions. She wasn't trying to control him. She was helping him live better. Her honesty was another quality he found remarkable. She spoke her mind clearly, without sugarcoating, but never with malice. When she disagreed with him, it was always in a constructive way. Once, when he tried to rearrange the living room back to his old style, she asked him to consider the reasons for her changes. "It's not about following rules," she said.
"It's about making the space more comfortable and functional. You'll feel it once you notice the difference."
He hesitated, but then allowed her to keep her arrangement. Later that evening, he realized she was right. The room felt more spacious, more welcoming, and even calming. One weekend, a heavy rainstorm hit the town. "This man has been made of eggs." The wind rattled the windows, and the rainwater began to leak slightly through an old patch in the roof. He panicked, unsure how to fix it quickly. She, however, remained calm. She grabbed buckets, towels, and tools, quickly containing the water and preventing damage. While he had been worried and frozen, she acted decisively, showing him that her strength was not just in housekeeping but in handling emergencies. He couldn't help but feel admiration and relief. Her confidence extended beyond tasks. She also had a remarkable ability to understand people. She interacted with neighbors and delivery people in a way that was polite yet assertive, earning respect without seeming overbearing. Once, a delivery man tried to leave a package in a precarious spot, and she calmly instructed him to place it safely. When he left, he gave her a respectful nod, clearly impressed. The man realized that her presence made the entire household run smoothly, not just because of her work, but because of her personality and intelligence. He also discovered moments of warmth and humor. She would occasionally tease him gently when he made small mistakes, like forgetting to put the trash out on time or misplacing an item. Her teasing was lighthearted, never cruel, and it brought laughter into the house, a sound he hadn't realized he had missed. She shared small stories from her past that were both funny and insightful, giving him glimpses of a life full of experiences he could only imagine. One day, he came home from work to find a small note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't a formal message, just a few lines in her neat handwriting. "I noticed your favorite chair was uncomfortable. I added a cushion for you. Hope it helps." He smiled, feeling touched by the thoughtfulness. She wasn't doing these things for praise. She was doing them because she genuinely cared about the comfort and well-being of the household. Her resilience and independence also became more apparent over time. He learned that she had faced many challenges in her life, often being judged unfairly by others because she didn't conform to expectations. Yet, she had persevered, finding work, managing her life, and living on her own terms. Her experiences had shaped her into someone who was strong, practical, and empathetic. He admired her not just for her skills, but for the person she was. There were still occasional disagreements, of course. She would challenge his habits, question his routines, and suggest changes he hadn't considered. But instead of feeling frustrated, he began to appreciate her perspective. Her ideas were often better than his own, and her direct approach encouraged him to think critically and reflect on his own habits. He realized that she was teaching him in subtle ways, helping him grow without even trying. One evening, as they were finishing dinner, he finally spoke aloud the thought that had been growing in his mind. "I never expected to find someone like you," he said. "I thought I wanted someone quiet and obedient, but I see now that I was wrong."
"You're more than I imagined."
She looked at him, her expression calm but attentive.
"I'm glad," she replied. "I don't fit everyone's expectations, but I do my best. And I think that's what really matters." Her words stayed with him. He realized that perfection was not about following instructions exactly. It was about commitment, intelligence, and heart. She had all of these qualities in abundance. She had come into his life as an outcast, someone different from what he expected, and yet she was proving to be indispensable in ways he could not have anticipated. By the end of the month, the house had transformed. It was cleaner, more organized, and even warmer. But more importantly, it had a sense of life that had been missing before. He felt less stress, more comfort, and a growing admiration for her presence. She had not only improved the house, but had also subtly changed his perspective on people and life. He began to trust her completely, letting her make decisions about daily routines, storage, and even small personal matters.
She was not just following orders, she was actively contributing to the smooth running of his life. And the more he saw her in action, the more he realized that her independence and fierceness were exactly what made her perfect for this role.
Her presence had also brought a sense of companionship. He wasn't lonely in the house anymore, not because she was a friend in the traditional sense, but because her presence was strong, reliable, and comforting. She didn't just manage the house, she brought a quiet energy that made the home feel alive. One evening, as he sat reading in his favorite chair, he looked around and noticed the small improvements she had made. The reorganized bookshelves, the labeled pantry, the new arrangement of chairs, and even the small plant by the window. All of these things reflected her care and thoughtfulness. He smiled to himself, realizing that his first impressions had been completely wrong. He had expected a quiet, obedient housekeeper, but what he had gained was far more valuable. A capable, intelligent, and caring presence that enriched his life in ways he could never have predicted. As the day ended, he reflected on the journey so far. She had arrived as a mysterious, unconventional figure, a fierce outcast who didn't conform to expectations. Yet, through her actions, she had proven herself to be not just a competent housekeeper, but a perfect fit for his life. He realized that sometimes the best people come in forms we least expect. They challenge us, surprise us, and ultimately help us grow. And in her, he had found exactly that. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. By now, the man had become deeply accustomed to her presence in the house. The initial curiosity, surprise, and cautious admiration had evolved into a steady, comfortable rhythm. She had proven herself time and again, not just as a housekeeper, but as someone reliable, thoughtful, and unexpectedly wise. Her fierceness, which had first seemed intimidating, had become a source of reassurance. He could trust her completely, and that trust brought him a sense of peace he hadn't realized he had been missing. One morning, a small crisis reminded him of just how invaluable she had become. A pipe in the bathroom had burst overnight, flooding the floor. Water was seeping into the walls, and he panicked, unsure what to do first. But she was calm. She had already turned off the main valve, mopped up the water, and assessed the damage. Without waiting for instructions, she called a plumber she trusted and explained the situation clearly. While he had been frozen with worry, she had taken control, demonstrating skill, composure, and decisiveness. He watched her work and felt a deep sense of gratitude. She didn't just clean and organize. She protected the home, thought ahead, and handled problems as they arose. Her independence and initiative had become indispensable. In that moment, he realized that hiring her had been one of the best decisions of his life. She was not just an employee, she was a partner in maintaining the household, someone who shared responsibility without hesitation. Her presence had also changed the atmosphere of the house. Where it had once been quiet and orderly, it was now vibrant, alive, and even warm. She had a way of bringing life into every room she touched. She arranged flowers in the living room, added soft lighting, and even created a small corner in the kitchen where he could sit and enjoy a cup of tea while watching the garden. These small touches made the house feel like a home, not just a space to live in. Over time, he also noticed changes in himself. He was less anxious, less controlling, and more willing to trust others. She had shown him that efficiency and care do not always come from following strict instructions. They come from thoughtfulness, creativity, and a willingness to act independently. By allowing her to take initiative, he had learned to let go of small worries and appreciate the results.
He realized that life was smoother when shared with someone capable, honest, and unafraid to speak their mind.
One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by unexpectedly. The man felt a small twinge of embarrassment. He wasn't prepared for company, and the house wasn't in the exact state he would have liked. But she greeted the neighbor warmly, offered tea, and engaged in polite conversation, all while managing minor household tasks seamlessly. By the time he joined them, he realized that she had created a welcoming atmosphere effortlessly. The neighbor complimented the house, noting how comfortable and organized it felt. He glanced at her, and for the first time, he fully understood the difference she had made. Her influence went beyond practical matters. She had a way of encouraging him to think differently about life. Once, while they were organizing old photographs in the attic, she asked him to share stories from his past.
He was hesitant at first, but her gentle curiosity made him open up.
They spent hours looking at old pictures, talking about memories and laughing at forgotten moments. She listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and encouraged him to reflect on experiences he had long overlooked. Her presence had brought not just order, but emotional warmth and companionship. There were moments of subtle challenge, too. She never shied away from expressing her opinion, even when it clashed with his. But he had learned to see these moments differently. She wasn't confrontational for the sake of argument. She offered perspectives he might not have considered. When he questioned small household changes she made, she explained the reasoning clearly, often with examples or thoughtful insights. Over time, he realized that her disagreements were actually lessons in problem-solving, efficiency, and perspective. One evening, a minor emergency occurred that highlighted her importance even further. A small fire broke out in the kitchen while he was distracted with work. Panic surged in him, but she reacted instantly. She moved swiftly to contain the fire, turning off the gas, grabbing a fire extinguisher, and ensuring the safety of the house. Her calm decisiveness prevented what could have been a disaster. Once the situation was under control, she explained the precautions she had taken and suggested additional safety measures for the future. He was in awe, not just of her practical skills, but of her courage and clarity under pressure. In that moment, he finally understood the truth he had been feeling for weeks. She was more than just a housekeeper.
She was a partner, a problem solver, a guardian of his home, and someone whose presence made life richer, safer, and more fulfilling.
He had initially thought he wanted someone quiet and obedient, but he realized that the qualities that had seemed intimidating at first, her independence, assertiveness, and strength, were exactly what he needed. Her impact extended into everyday life as well. She had a way of noticing small comforts, like remembering which chair he preferred, adjusting lighting for reading, and arranging items so that daily routines were smoother. She anticipated his needs without being asked, often making thoughtful changes that improved the flow of the household.
He began to trust her completely, allowing her to take charge of small details while he focused on work and personal matters.
This trust, once difficult for him to give, had become natural. It wasn't just efficiency that she brought. It was also respect, honesty, and genuine care. She had a remarkable ability to communicate clearly and kindly, ensuring that both tasks and expectations were understood. She never overstepped in a harmful way, but she never hesitated to offer suggestions or improvements. Her presence was strong yet comforting, a rare combination that he had never experienced before. One evening, as they were finishing dinner, he looked around the house and reflected on how much it had changed since she had arrived. Every room bore the subtle touch of her care, neat organization, thoughtful details, and a sense of life that had been absent before. He realized that the house was no longer just a place to live, it was a home.
And the reason for that transformation was clear: her presence, skill, and character. He spoke aloud, almost to himself, but she heard him. "I didn't realize. You were exactly what I needed. I thought I wanted someone quiet, someone who would just follow instructions. But you've changed everything."
She looked at him calmly, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips.
"Sometimes what we need isn't what we expect," she said. "I do my best, and I hope it helps." It did more than help. It had transformed his daily life. He felt less burdened, more organized, and even happier. Her presence had brought structure without rigidity, strength without aggression, and care without intrusion. He realized that she was not just performing tasks, she was enhancing his life in ways he could not have imagined. As the weeks continued, he found himself relying on her more, not just for household work, but for her insight, her judgment, and her presence. She had become a quiet, strong companion, someone whose independence and skill he deeply respected. He often marveled at how someone so unconventional could fit so perfectly into his life. She had arrived as an outcast, someone judged by others and underestimated. Yet, she had proven herself irreplaceable, a perfect match for his home and his needs. By the end of her first 3 months, he realized he could not imagine life without her. She had transformed the house, eased his daily burdens, and even helped him grow as a person. Her fierceness, once intimidating, had become a source of inspiration. Her independence, once challenging, had become a reason to trust her fully.
He had learned that true value often comes from unexpected places, and that sometimes the best fit is someone who surprises you, challenges you, and ultimately enriches your life in ways you never anticipated. One quiet evening, he sat in the living room watching her tidy up the last of the day's tasks. He smiled, thinking about the journey so far. The house was orderly, welcoming, and alive. The man realized that what he had thought was just a decision to hire a housekeeper had become something much greater. He had gained not just help, but a partner, a steady presence, and a friend. She had arrived as a fierce outcast and had become the perfect fit for his life, proving that sometimes the most valuable people are those who challenge our expectations and bring out the best in us. In that moment, he understood fully that appearances, first impressions, and conventional expectations were often misleading. She had shown him that true competence, care, and worth are measured by actions, integrity, and thoughtfulness, not conformity. And as he looked around the home that now felt more like a sanctuary than a house, he felt gratitude, respect, and a quiet joy that came from finding exactly the right person, in exactly the right way, at exactly the right time.